The air in the courtroom is so thick you can't breathe. A pregnant woman, her face pale with stress, suddenly collapses, her body hitting the courtroom floor with a sickening thud. Across the room, her husband's beautiful, smug mistress doesn't flinch. She smiles. She thinks she's won. She thinks she has the man, the money, and the victory. But what she doesn't know is that the judge is holding a sealed white envelope. An envelope that contains a DNA test. And the truth inside is about to destroy her world, not the one of the woman on the floor. The silence in Department 2 of the Los Angeles Superior Court was not a peaceful one. It was the pressurized, heavy silence of a submarine deep underwater, where every creak and groan threatened a total implosion. Elena Rivers, 8 months pregnant, felt that pressure in her chest. Her lungs were too small, her stomach too compressed. The baby, her baby, was kicking, a frantic, tiny drumbeat against her ribs, as if sensing its mother's panic. Across the room, her husband, or technically, her soon-to-be ex-husband, Mark Rivers, sat perfectly still. He wore a $4,000 Tom Ford suit, the color of shark skin. He had not made eye contact with her in 2 hours. Not since his lawyer, David Stone, had begun his opening statement. And then, there was her, Chloe Bennett. She sat in the first row of the public gallery, directly behind Mark. She was everything Elena was not at this moment. Where Elena was swollen, pale and trembling, Chloe was sleek, tanned, and poised. Her sharp blonde bob was immaculate. Her white silk blouse was buttoned just low enough to be suggestive, but just high enough to feign modesty. She was a predator disguised as a gazelle. "Mrs. Rivers," David Stone said, his voice dripping with a false, pitying courtesy. "You contend that your marriage was, quote, happy and stable until Mr. Rivers began his relationship with Ms. Bennett?" Elena's own lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, half rose. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering a heavily pregnant woman." "I'm fine," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. She gripped the polished wood of the witness stand. The wood was cold, but her palms were slick with sweat. "Yes, we were happy." David Stone paced. "Happy? Is it your testimony that happy couples frequently take separate vacations?" "I went to see my mother," Elena said, her voice rising slightly. "She was having surgery." "Right. And while you were gone," Stone continued, "you were in constant contact with a Mr. Liam Walker, were you not?" Elena's head snapped up. "Liam? He's a friend. He's my brother's business partner. A friend you met for coffee 3 times that week. A friend you were seen with, late at night, outside his apartment building." Stone dropped a stack of 8 or 10 glossy photos onto the bailiff's desk. They were grainy, invasive. "I was dropping off paperwork for my brother," Elena cried, the desperation pitching her voice high. He was comforting me. I was worried about my mother. I was worried about Mark," she shot a look at her husband, "because he hadn't called me in 2 days. Mark flinched, but said nothing. He just stared at the knot of his tie. Chloe Bennett watched this exchange with a look of profound, almost bored, amusement. She crossed her legs, the quiet hiss of her silk trousers audible in the silence. She was winning. This was the story she had crafted. This was the narrative she had whispered to Mark night after night. Elena is the liar. She trapped you. She's cheating on you. That baby probably isn't even yours. Mrs. Rivers, David Stone moved in for the kill. My client, Mr. Rivers, is petitioning this court to deny all alimony and spousal support. He is also formally contesting paternity of your unborn child, pending a DNA test after birth, on the grounds that you, Mrs. Rivers, committed adultery. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Contesting paternity. She had known it was coming. Sarah had warned her. But to hear it said in this sterile room, under the flat fluorescent lights, was a different kind of violation. She looked at Mark, pleading with her eyes. "Mark, please, don't do this. You know, you were there. You held my hand when we heard the heartbeat." Mark finally looked at her. His eyes were not angry. They were not sad. They were empty, cold. He had been completely hollowed out and refilled with Chloe's ambition, that look, that emptiness. That was the final crack in the dam. Elena's vision tunneled, the sharp, aquiline face of Judge Harrison blurred. The humming of the lights became a roar. The baby kicked, a hard, sharp jab that stole her breath. "Mrs. Rivers?" The judge's voice seemed to come from miles away. Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She felt the blood rush from her head, a dizzying, sickening plummet. The room tilted. Her hand slipped from the wooden rail. She managed. And then, nothing. Elena Rivers collapsed, a heap of grey maternity wear on the floor of the witness stand. Chaos erupted. Sarah Jenkins screamed her name. The bailiff shouted, "All rise," out of pure instinct. Mark, shocked, actually stood up, his chair scraping loudly. But Chloe Bennett... Chloe did not move. As the bailiff rushed to Elena's side and Sarah frantically tried to rouse her, Chloe watched, and in the chaos, unseen by the judge or the lawyers, her perfectly painted red lips curved into a slow, satisfied, undeniable smile. She had won. The problem had just eliminated itself. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Their life, Mark and Eleanor's, had been a curated story of modern success. They'd met at a UCLA alumni mixer. He was a junior analyst with ambitions that burned like jet fuel. She was a graphic designer with a kind heart and a quick laugh. He had been drawn to her calm, her stability. She anchored him. They married 2 years later at a winery in Napa. The photos showed a couple drunk on sunshine and cheap champagne, blissfully unaware of the future. Mark's career exploded. He co-founded a real estate tech firm, Rivers Gale Analytics, and the money started flowing. Not just flowing, but gushing. They bought a 4-bedroom glass and steel house in the Hollywood Hills. Eleanor quit her job, at Mark's insistence. "I want to take care of you," he'd said, kissing her forehead. "You've supported me. Now let me support you." So she did. She designed their house. She hosted the dinners. She networked with the wives of his investors. She became the perfect accessory to his perfect life, and for a while, it was perfect. When she found out she was pregnant, after 2 years of trying, it felt like the final piece. Mark had wept. He'd held her in the marble bathroom, his tears wet on her shoulder, whispering, "A baby. Our baby. A son. Or a daughter," she'd laughed. "Or a daughter, I don't care. A family. Our family." The change started 6 months ago. It was subtle at first. Mark was working late, but that wasn't new. What was new was the agitation, the way he'd jump when his phone buzzed, the new, expensive obsession with his appearance. He started getting executive haircuts, bought a whole new wardrobe, and started wearing a cologne she didn't recognize. It was smoky and woody. Santal, 33. Then Elena met Chloe Bennett. It was at a fundraiser Mark's company was sponsoring. Chloe was the new head of acquisitions at a rival firm. She'd walked up to Mark and Elena, her hand sliding possessively into the crook of Mark's arm. "Mark, darling," she'd purred, ignoring Elena completely. "You didn't tell me you were bringing company." "Chloe, this is my wife, Elena," Mark had said, his voice tight. Chloe's eyes had scanned Elena, who was just starting to show, with a look of predatory assessment. "Oh. How? Lovely. You're the wife." She'd laughed, a tinkling, brittle sound. "It's a pleasure." Elena had smelled it on her instantly, that same smoky, woody scent. Santal 33. Her world, which she thought was built on bedrock, turned out to be built on sand. The confrontation was explosive. Mark, a man who had never so much as raised his voice, became a stranger. He didn't just confess, he attacked. "Yes, I'm with Chloe," he'd yelled, shattering a water glass against the kitchen's quartz backsplash. "You want to know why? Because she sees me. She's not just nesting. She's alive. She's smart. We have conversations, Elena. What do? You pick out paint swatches and go to prenatal yoga." "I'm carrying your child," Elena had screamed back, tears of rage and betrayal streaming down her face. "Are you?" The words hung in the air. Elena froze. "What did you say?" Mark's face was pale, his eyes wide with a fanaticism she didn't recognize. "Chloe, she's seen things. She's heard things. You and that yoga guy, Liam. You think I'm stupid? Liam? Mark, that's insane. He's gay. He's my friend." "A convenient story," Mark spat. "How do I know, Elena? How do I know you didn't get pregnant just to trap me when you felt me pulling away?" It was a script, a perfectly rehearsed, venomous script, and Elena knew exactly who had written it. Chloe Bennett. From that day, the man she married was gone. He moved out a week later. The divorce papers were served 2 weeks after that. And the central clause, the one designed to inflict maximum pain and leave her with absolutely nothing, was the accusation of adultery and the contesting of paternity. Chloe hadn't just stolen her husband, she had poisoned his memory. She was trying to steal Elena's child, her past, and her future, all at once. Elena, broke, pregnant, and alone in the big glass house, had called the only person she could trust, Sarah Jenkins, her college roommate, now one of the most feared family law attorneys in LA. "He's contesting paternity," Sarah had said, her voice quiet and cold. "That's a mistake. That's a fatal mistake. We can fix this, Elena, but you're going to have to fight." Back in the courtroom, chaos reigned. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. "Recess. 30 minutes. Bailiff, call the paramedics. Clear the court." Mark was frozen, staring at Elena's still form on the floor. For a single, fleeting second, the mask of cold indifference cracked. He saw his wife, the mother of his child, unconscious. He took a step toward her. "Mark." Chloe's voice was sharp, a whip crack that cut through the noise. He stopped. He turned. She didn't look at him. She was grabbing her purse, her movements efficient and angry. "Don't be an idiot, Mark. It's a ploy. She's faking. It's what they do. They get emotional to win." She just collapsed, Chloe," Mark stammered, his confusion evident. "She fainted." "Pregnant women do that. It's a sympathy card. Don't you dare fall for it," Chloe hissed. She grabbed his hand, her nails digging into his skin. "Stone is winning. Don't ruin this. We're getting you out. We're getting everything. Remember the plan." Mark looked back at Eleanor, who was now being gently lifted onto a gurney by 2 paramedics. His face hardened. The mask was back in place. He nodded, letting Chloe lead him out of the courtroom into the hall. Chloe Bennett was not just a mistress. She was a strategist. She hadn't stumbled into an affair with Mark Rivers. She had targeted him. She saw a man with immense wealth, a new company, and, in her eyes, a dowdy domestic wife who was a weak link. The Liam Walker plot was her masterpiece. Liam was, as Elena had said, a friend. He was also, as Elena had not said, Chloe's ex-boyfriend. A bitter, acrimonious breakup from 5 years prior, before Liam had come to terms with his own sexuality, and before Chloe had sharpened her claws. Chloe knew Liam was now gay. She also knew he ran in the same social circles as Elena's family. When she saw Elena having coffee with him one afternoon, a perfectly innocent meeting, the entire plan had downloaded into her brain. She'd hired a private investigator. She'd fed him dates and times. Get a photo. Make it look intimate. The PI, a sleazy man named Sal, had done his job. A long lens shot of Eleanor hugging Liam goodbye, cropped to look like a desperate embrace. A photo of her at night, outside his apartment, that didn't show her brother standing just out of frame, collecting the paperwork. Chloe had presented this evidence to Mark, not with anger, but with tears. "Mark, darling, I didn't want to believe it," she'd sobbed one night in his penthouse. "She's been seeing him for months. Oh, Mark, I think the baby. I think it's his." It was the perfect poison. It preyed on Mark's deepest insecurity, that he wasn't worthy of his own success, that his simple wife was smarter than him, that she was pulling a fast one. Chloe made him believe that he was the victim, and he, blinded by her beauty and his own ego, had believed every word. Now in the hallway, she smoothed his tie. "Let the paramedics handle her. She'll be fine. When we go back in, Stone will motion to postpone. We'll object. We finish this today, Mark. You will be free." Mark nodded, his eyes clear now. The programming had reasserted itself. "You're right. She's fine. It's just a shock. Let's finish this." Chloe smiled, a genuine smile this time, and kissed him. "That's my man." She was so close. The house in the hills, the joint accounts, the river's name. All of it. What Chloe didn't know was that while she was playing checkers, Sarah Jenkins was playing chess. In the small, sterile witness room, Elena's eyes fluttered open. The acrid smell of an ammonia capsule hit her nose. "Elena, honey, can you hear me?" Sarah Jenkins was kneeling in front of her, her face a mask of concern. A paramedic was taking her blood pressure. "The baby!" Elena gasped, her hands flying to her stomach. "The baby's fine, Mrs. Rivers," the paramedic said calmly. "Your blood pressure is high, and your blood sugar is low. You're dehydrated and under extreme stress. But the fetal heart rate is strong." Elena sagged back into the chair, relief making her dizzy all over again. "I fainted. In front of all of them. You fainted because your husband and his barracuda lawyer are trying to slander you into oblivion," Sarah said, her voice pure ice. "And that snake, Chloe, smiled. I saw her." She smiled?" Elena's voice was small. "Don't worry about her," Sarah said, her tone shifting from friend to lawyer. "Elena, listen to me. This is good. This is our moment. Stone overplayed his hand. He humiliated a pregnant woman to the point of collapse. The judge is furious." "What does it matter?" Elena murmured. "They'll just postpone. Mark will keep lying." "No, he won't," Sarah said, standing up. She pulled a file from her briefcase, and from that file she pulled a single, sealed, legal-sized white envelope. "What is that?" "That, Elena, is our in case of emergency break glass option. You remember when Mark first filed and he accused you? You were hysterical. You said, 'I wish I could just prove it to him now.'" "Yes." "So I called a friend at the UCLA genetics lab. I told Mark's lawyer that you, in an act of good faith, were willing to undergo an amniocentesis, a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. Stone, arrogant fool that he is, signed the order. He thought you were bluffing. He thought you'd never go through with it." Elena's eyes widened. You did? But when?" 3 weeks ago. You thought you were just going in for a standard checkup. I had the lab tech there. with the court order. We took the sample. Mark was notified. He sent his own DNA sample via his lawyer. He thought it was just a formality he'd use to beat you with after the baby was born. Sarah tapped the envelope. The results were couriered to Judge Harrison's chambers this morning. They are sealed. I don't even know what they say. Only the judge. But, Sarah, we know what they say, Elena said, confused. I know, Sarah said, a grim smile playing on her lips. And you know. But they don't. And that idiot, David Stone, just based his entire case on the allegation that the child is not Mark's. He committed his client, on the record, to a lie. And I am about to hand him the shovel to bury himself with. Sarah, Elena, I need you to be strong. Can you go back in there? Can you face them one more time? Elena looked at her hands, then at her swollen stomach. A new strength was flooding her veins, cold and clear. The strength of a mother. She had been fighting for her past. Now she was fighting for her future, her child's future. She slowly, painfully, got to her feet. Yes, let's go back. Let's end this. When they re-entered the courtroom, the atmosphere was different. The gallery was whispering. Mark and Chloe were back in their seats, Chloe looking impatient, Mark looking pale. David Stone was shuffling papers, looking annoyed by the delay. Your Honor, Sarah Jenkins said, her voice ringing out, clear as a bell. My client is stable and wishes to proceed. However, before Mr. Stone can continue his slanderous line of questioning, my client has been subjected to enough. She turned to Mark. Mr. Rivers has, on record, contested the paternity of this child. He has based his entire divorce petition on this allegation. Your Honor, David Stone stood up. We have agreed to table this until the child's birth. No, we have not, Sarah interrupted. We agreed to follow legal procedure, and we did. Your Honor, 3 weeks ago, my client submitted to a court-ordered, binding, prenatal paternity test, processed by LabCorp Genetics, case number 458B. The results were delivered to your chambers this morning. In light of the public and cruel accusations made today, we demand, that you unseal and read those results into the record. Now. The courtroom went utterly silent. David Stone's face went white. He looked at Mark. You did what? Mark looked just as confused. I sent a swab. I thought. Chloe leaned forward, her eyes wide with sudden animal panic. Mark, what is she talking about? What test? Judge Harrison, his face a granite mask, held up the white envelope. Mr. Stone, Ms. Jenkins is correct. The results are here. And given the dramatic nature of these proceedings and the collapse of the witness, I am inclined to agree. The truth of this matter seems pertinent. He tore the seal. Across the room, Chloe Bennett's smug, confident smile was gone. It had been replaced by a tight, thin line of pure, unadulterated fear. The sound of Judge Harrison tearing the heavy bond paper of the envelope was the loudest thing Eleanor had ever heard. It was a rip in the fabric of the reality Chloe had so carefully woven. David Stone was on his feet, stammering, Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The chain of custody. We protest this. Sit down, Mr. Stone. The judge's voice was a low growl. You signed the order. Your client provided his sample. The lab is the most accredited in the state. This document is binding. Now sit. Down. Stone fell back into his chair as if shoved. Judge Harrison put on his reading glasses. He scanned the document, his expression unreadable. He read it once. Then he read it a second time, more slowly. Elena felt her heart trying to escape her chest. Just say it. Just say it. Chloe Bennett was rigid. She was doing the math. She was trying to figure out how this could happen. They were bluffing. It had to be a bluff. She's lying. The test is fake. But one look at the embossed letterhead in the judge's hand told her it was very, very real. The judge finally looked up. He did not look at Elena. He looked directly at Mark Rivers. Mr. Rivers, you have filed this motion, number 33B, petitioning to deny spousal support and all future child support on the grounds of adultery. Your entire case, as presented by your counsel today, hinges on the allegation that you are not the biological father of the child Mrs. Rivers is carrying. Is that correct? Mark, his face the color of ash, could only nod. Yes, Your Honor. Based on information I received. I'm not interested in your information, the judge cut him off. I am interested in facts, and the facts are now in my hand. He adjusted his glasses. I have here the official report from LabCorp Genetics, reference number 425-8B. The parties tested are Elena Rivers, mother; Mark Rivers, alleged father; and fetus via amniotic sample. He paused, letting the words hang in the dead air. The analysis of the DNA profiles, he read slowly, confirms that the alleged father, Mark Rivers, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the fetus. David Stone slumped. The report continues, the judge said, his voice rising in volume. The probability of paternity is 99.9999999%. A collective gasp went up from the gallery. Elena burst into tears. But these were not the tears of pain or fear. They were tears of pure, unadulterated release. A sob of vindication tore from her throat. Sarah Jenkins put a supportive arm around her, her own eyes blazing with triumph. Therefore, Judge Harrison said, Mr. Rivers, your claim is found to be, unequivocally, false. It is a lie. Mark Rivers looked as though he'd been shot. He turned, his eyes wide and uncomprehending, to Chloe. You said, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Chloe Bennett's face was a grotesque mask of disbelief. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the mottled, red panic blooming on her neck. No, she whispered. No, it's wrong. The lab. They made a mistake. They have to be wrong. Mark, they're lying. The lab is wrong. LabCorp is wrong. But you, a woman with a vested interest in the outcome, are right? The judge boomed. He wasn't even looking at her, but his words were aimed right at her. He slammed his gavel. This court strikes Mr. Rivers' motion, 33B, in its entirety. It is dismissed with prejudice. This court finds that your claim was not only baseless, but filed with malicious intent. We will be addressing the matter of perjury and legal fees later. Ms. Jenkins, we will now proceed with your client's petition for alimony, child support, and division of assets. Mark was hyperventilating. He had just lost. He had lost everything. He had based his entire case on a lie she had told him. He turned to Chloe, his face contorting with a new, unfamiliar emotion. Rage. You did this. Mark, shut up, she hissed. It's a setback, that's all. We can still... But Sarah Jenkins wasn't finished. She stood up, her voice smooth and dangerous. Your Honor, that is wonderful news. And in light of this court's finding of malicious intent, we have one more item we would like to submit to the record. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. Go on, Miss Jenkins. My client, Sarah said, is not the only pregnant woman or mother in Mr. Rivers's life. Chloe Bennett froze. What? Mark said, turning to Sarah. Miss Chloe Bennett, Sarah said, pointing directly at her, has a 1-year-old son. A son she has been passing off to Mr. Rivers as his own. A son she has been using as leverage, claiming he was the true heir to the Rivers estate, and the reason Mark had to leave his cheating wife. David Stone shot to his feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is outrageous. Miss Bennet is not a party to this divorce. Her child has no bearing on—" "He has every bearing, Your Honor," Sarah shouted back, "because my client's case for emotional distress and the malicious intent we just proved hinges on the total manipulation of Mr. Rivers by Miss Bennet. She didn't just tell him one lie, Your Honor. She told him two." Chloe's eyes were wide with terror. "This is insane. You can't talk about my child." "Oh, I can," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Because while we were at the lab, we were very, very busy. Chloe's mind was a frantic scramble. My child. My baby. Leo. How did they know? How could they? She did have a son. Leo Bennet. A beautiful, 1-year-old boy. And yes, she had told Mark he was his. It had been the final, brilliant stroke of her plan. 6 months into her affair with Mark, she had realized he was still waffling. He was still attached to Elena, still caught up in the morality of it all. He needed a stronger push. She'd accidentally gotten pregnant. It was a one-night stand with an old flame, a moment of weakness. But she'd seen the opportunity. She had timed it perfectly. She told Mark she was pregnant and that she was so scared. Mark, trapped, had been forced to choose. But then she'd lost the baby, a miscarriage brought on by the stress of him being with her. Mark had been consumed by guilt. A few months later, she had actually gotten pregnant. This time it wasn't Mark's. It couldn't be. It was Liam Walker. It was before her plan to frame Elena with him had even begun. It was a stupid, drunken, angry relapse. Liam, confused and vulnerable, had fallen into bed with her. Chloe had been furious with herself. But then she realized she didn't have to be. She told Mark she was pregnant again. His baby. A miracle after their loss. When Leo was born, he looked nothing like Mark. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. Mark was dark-haired, dark-eyed. "He looks like my grandfather," she'd lied smoothly. "The Bennet genes are strong." Mark, so desperate for a family with her, so desperate to believe in this new life, had never questioned it. He had doted on Leo. He was paying for a full-time nanny, a condo in Santa Monica, and had set up a trust fund for his son. This was the leverage. This was the real reason he was fighting Elena so hard. He was protecting his new family, his real family. And now this shark, this bitch Sarah Jenkins, was talking about her son. "Your Honor," Chloe stood up, her voice shaking with rage. "I will not have my child's life dragged into this circus. This is character assassination." "It is a question of fraud, Miss Bennet," Sarah Jenkins said calmly. "You have no proof," Chloe shrieked. "Your Honor," Sarah said, turning back to the judge. "As I said, we were very busy. When my investigator discovered that Ms. Bennet was claiming her child was also Mr. Rivers, we amended our discovery request. We anticipated that a second DNA test might be necessary. You tested my son." Chloe was aghast. "That's illegal. You can't do that." "We didn't have to," Sarah smiled. "When Mr. Rivers's lawyer sent us his client's DNA kit, he was so arrogant, so sure of his case. He didn't read the fine print. We had included a second testing kit for alleged child 2. We told him it was a backup, but Mr. Rivers, believing Leo was his son and wanting to prove his fertility, took a cheek swab from both the child he was denying and the child he was claiming." Mark looked at his lawyer, David Stone, in total horror. Stone's face crumpled. He remembered the package, the 2 kits. He had just handed them to Mark. "Do this," he'd said, "for both. It's just paperwork." Mark had swabbed Elena's unborn child, via the amnio, and he had proudly swabbed his son, Leo. He thought he was proving Eleanor was a liar, and he was a virile, wronged man. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "we have a second report, also delivered to your chambers this morning." Judge Harrison's eyes were wide. He'd seen courtroom drama, but this was a new level. He looked down at his desk. He had overlooked the second file. There, attached to the first report, was a second, sealed envelope. This was no longer a divorce. This was a demolition. "Mark." "No," Chloe whimpered, sinking into a seat. "You," Mark said, turning to her. His voice was a low, terrifying rumble. "You told me. He was mine." "He is yours, Mark. He is. They faked it. It's a trick." Chloe was grasping at straws, her eyes wild. Judge Harrison tore open the second envelope. The sound was even more violent than the first. This time he didn't pause. His eyes scanned the page, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine shock crossed his features. He looked up, not at Chloe, not at Mark, but at the entire courtroom. "This," he said, "is a den of vipers." He stared at Chloe Bennett, his eyes boring into her. "Ms. Bennett, you are now, officially, a person of interest to this court." The silence that had fallen over the court before was nothing compared to this. It was a vacuum. Even the air conditioning seemed to have shut off. Mark Rivers was staring at Chloe, his face a mask of dawning, terrifying comprehension. The lies, the whispers, the evidence. It was all replaying in his mind, but this time in a new, sickening light. "Your Honor," David Stone tried, his voice a weak croak. This is beyond the scope of a divorce proceeding. This is fraud, Mr. Stone," Judge Harrison snapped. "This is a conspiracy to commit perjury, to defraud a court, and to defraud your own client. I suggest you sit down and remain silent, lest you be held in contempt, or as an accessory." Stone sat. He looked ill. The judge fixed his gaze back on the report. "I have in my hand," he said, his voice raison serviceable, "the results of a DNA analysis between Mr. Mark Rivers and the minor child, Leo Bennett." Chloe Bennett was shaking her head, tears of pure, unadulterated rage and panic streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "No, no, no." "The report states," the judge read, "that Mr. Mark Rivers is excluded as the biological father of the child, Leo Bennett. A bomb had gone off. Mark Rivers made a sound, a guttural, wounded sound. He slumped in his chair, his $4,000 suit suddenly looking like a cheap costume. He had been played. He had been played for the biggest fool in Los Angeles. "The probability of paternity," the judge continued, his voice void of all emotion, "is 0.00%. Elena watched, her hand on her stomach, her own tears forgotten. This wasn't just victory, this was annihilation. "But Ms. Jenkins," the judge said, looking at Sarah, "you seem to have known this. But your investigation, it seems, went one step further. There is an addendum here. A third-party analysis." Sarah Jenkins nodded, her face grim. "Yes, Your Honor. We had a strong suspicion. When Ms. Bennett fabricated the story about my client and Mr. Liam Walker, we did our own research. We discovered that Miss Bennett and Mr. Walker had a prior relationship. A very bitter one. It seemed too convenient." "Objection!" Stone yelled, finding his voice. "Hearsay. Conjecture." "It was conjecture, Your Honor," Sarah agreed smoothly, "which is why we needed proof. My investigator obtained a discarded coffee cup from Mr. Liam Walker. We submitted his DNA to the lab for comparison with the sample from the child, Leo Bennett. Chloe Bennett went from pale to a ghastly, greenish white. She looked like she was going to be sick. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "the lie must be exposed. All of it." The judge stared at Sarah. He was, for a moment, impressed. He looked back at the file. "You are correct, Miss Jenkins. The lab report contains a third analysis, a comparison between Leo Bennett and Mr. Liam Walker." The judge paused. He looked directly at Chloe. "Miss Bennett, you sat in this courtroom and smiled while my bailiff attended to a collapsed pregnant woman. A woman you and your associate, Mr. Rivers, accused of adultery. You accused her of having an affair with Mr. Liam Walker." It was," Chloe stammered. "The results of this test," the judge boomed, his voice hitting the back wall, "confirm with 99.999% certainty that Mr. Liam Walker is, in fact, the biological father of your son, Leo Bennett." The room exploded. Mark Rivers shot out of his chair as if he'd been electrocuted. "What?" He lunged, not at Elena, not at the judge. He lunged at Chloe. You lied!" He roared, his face purple. "You!" The bailiff was on him in a second, restraining him. "Mr. Rivers, stand down!" "She framed her!" Mark was screaming, a man insane with realization. "She framed her! With you!" Chloe was hysterical. She was sobbing, great, ugly, gasping sobs. The mask of perfection was not just cracked, it was shattered, ground into dust. I hate him!" she shrieked, pointing at Mark, then at where Elena sat. "I hate you! You had everything! You had him! He was mine! I deserved it! I deserved it! Bailiff, detain Miss Bennett!" Judge Harrison roared, banging his gavel. "And Mr. Rivers, sit down, or I will have you detained for contempt." Mark, his rage spent, collapsed back into his chair, a broken, empty husk. Elena sat watching it all, her heart hammering. She looked at Mark, this man she had loved, this man who had been so easily poisoned, and she felt nothing. Not hatred, not even pity. Just a vast, cold emptiness. He had been destroyed, but he had loaded the gun himself. Chloe had just told him where to point it. The courtroom doors were sealed. The public gallery, which had been buzzing with the scandal of a lifetime, was now empty, silenced by Judge Harrison's order. The air that remained was thick and toxic, charged with the ozone of total annihilation. It was no longer a place of law, but a place of reckoning. Judge Harrison, his face a mask of cold, judicial fury, removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He did this slowly, deliberately, as if trying to physically contain his rage before unleashing it. When he spoke, his voice was not a boom. It was a low, cutting, surgical instrument. "Miss Bennett." Chloe, who was hunched over, guarded by a stern-faced bailiff, flinched. She was still weeping, but her sobs were now the ugly, gasping, hiccuping sounds of a child who had been caught red-handed. "You are, without a doubt, one of the most callously manipulative individuals I have ever seen," the judge began. "You sat in this room, on that bench, and you smiled. You smiled as a pregnant woman, a woman you systematically slandered, collapsed from the stress you inflicted. You didn't just lie to Mr. Rivers, you committed a calculated, vicious fraud." "No," Chloe whispered, her voice a wet rasp. I love him. He loves me. This is a trick. That lawyer, she faked it all." "Silence," the judge roared, his control finally snapping. "You will be silent. You faked a paternity. You invented an affair, knowingly framing an innocent man to do so. You provided false information that directly led to a perjured court filing. You are guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal fraud, and perjury. I will be referring your case, in its entirety, to the district attorney's office." I strongly suspect they will also be interested in malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I hope, for your son's sake, you have a competent criminal defense attorney. You are going to need one." The judge then turned his venomous gaze on David Stone, who looked as if he was about to have a heart attack. "Mr. Stone, you are an officer of this court. Your duty is to the truth, not to the convenience of your client's narrative. You blindly accepted evidence that was clearly fabricated. You signed off on a motion contesting paternity, while you had the results of a second paternity test sitting on your desk. You either failed in your due diligence to a degree that borders on malpractice, or you were a willing co-conspirator. Either way, your conduct in this courtroom has been an embarrassment to the bar. I am, as of this moment, filing a formal complaint and referring this entire transcript to the State Bar of California for disciplinary review." David Stone's face went white. This wasn't just a lost case. It was the end of his career. He sank into his chair, utterly defeated. Finally, the judge turned to the shell of the man in the sharkskin suit. "Mr. Rivers." Mark Rivers looked up. His eyes were vacant, his face grey and slack. He looked like a man who had aged 30 years in the span of 30 minutes. "You are, perhaps, the most gullible man to ever walk into my courtroom," the judge said, his voice laced with contempt. "But you are not a victim, Mr. Rivers. You are an accomplice. You weren't just fooled, you were eager to be fooled. It fed your ego, didn't it? The idea that this viper would risk it all for you. The idea that your quiet, stable, pregnant wife was secretly a liar?" As the judge spoke, Mark's mind was a kaleidoscope of his own stupidity. He saw himself in the penthouse with Chloe, listening to her fears about Elena and Liam. He saw himself proudly swabbing his son Leo's cheek, so sure of his new life. He saw the look on Elena's face in their kitchen, the utter, shattered disbelief when he first said, "How do I know it's mine?" He hadn't been tricked. He had wanted to believe the lie. It gave him the excuse he needed to leave, to be the dynamic, desired man Chloe told him he was. He had been a willing participant in the character assassination of his own wife, the mother of his actual child. He hadn't just lost his money, he had bartered his soul for a fantasy, and the bill had just come due. "You brought this poison into a court of law," the judge continued. "You cost this court its valuable time, and you cost Mrs. Rivers her health, her reputation, and her peace of mind. While it is clear you were manipulated, it does not absolve you of the consequences. You built the fire. You just let Ms. Bennett strike the match." He turned, his demeanor shifting instantly to one of respect. "Ms. Jenkins, your petition." Sarah Jenkins stood, a pillar of righteous victory. Her voice was clear and strong. "Yes, Your Honor. We demand an immediate emergency judgment on all matters. 1. Custody. We ask for full, sole, legal and physical custody of the unborn child. Mr. Rivers's proven instability, his malicious behavior, and his susceptibility to gross manipulation make him an unfit co-parent at this time. 2. Property. We ask that Mr. Rivers be immediately vacated from the family home in the Hollywood Hills. It is to be assigned to Mrs. Rivers as her sole and separate property, effective immediately. 3. Support. We ask for full spousal support, retroactive to the date of filing, and a separate, significant, punitive damage award for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and slander. 4. Fees. Mr. Rivers is to pay 100% of Mrs. Rivers' legal fees and all court costs. 5. Assets. And finally, Your Honor, regarding the community property. The firm Rivers Gale Analytics was built during this marriage. We ask for a 60-40 split of all assets in favor of Mrs. Rivers. This is not a standard 50-50 split because Mr. Rivers engaged in the malicious dissipation of marital funds. He used community property to support Miss Bennet, her child, and the very legal team he assembled to defraud his own wife. He must make her whole. 60%? Your Honour! David Stone yelped, a last dying gasp of protest. That is punitive. It's unheard of. It is exactly punitive, Mr. Stone, Judge Harrison thundered, and it is not unheard of in cases of gross malicious fraud. He didn't just cheat. He used his wife's own money to finance the conspiracy to leave her and his child destitute. Frankly, Miss Jenkins, 60% sounds generous. The judge fixed his eyes on Mark. Mr. Rivers, do you, in any way, contest these terms? Mark Rivers looked at his lawyer, his face crumpled. He then looked, for the last time, at his wife. Elena was watching him. Her face was pale, tear-streaked, but she was no longer trembling. She was perfectly still. Her eyes were not filled with hatred or even pity. They were just empty. She was looking at a stranger. In that one look, he saw everything he had destroyed. The life, the family, the love, all of it, burned to the ground for nothing. He shook his head, a single, slow, defeated motion. "No, Your Honour," he whispered, his voice cracking. I don't contest. I don't contest anything." "Mark, you can't," Stone pleaded. "Shut up, David," Mark whispered back, covering his face with his hands. "Just shut up. It's over." "Then it is done." Judge Harrison lifted his gavel. "This court grants the judgment in full, in favor of the petitioner, Elena Rivers, on all 5 points. This divorce is finalized, effective immediately. Mr. Rivers, you will have 24 hours to vacate the family home. An officer will accompany you." He pointed the gavel at Chloe. "Bailiff, remand Miss Bennet to the custody of the Sheriff's Department. She will be processed for booking." "No!" Chloe shrieked as the bailiff grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. Mark, tell them! You love me! Mark!" The sharp click of the handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists, a sound that echoed the finality of the gavel. She was dragged, sobbing and incoherent, out of the courtroom. Elena slowly got to her feet, aided by Sarah. She didn't look at Mark again. She put a protective hand on her stomach, took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real breath she had taken in 6 months, and turned. As she passed the table where Mark sat, a broken, empty husk, he looked up, his eyes red and pleading. "Elena, She didn't stop. She didn't pause. She just kept walking. She walked out of the courtroom, away from the ruin of her past, and toward the terrifying, unknown, but free future, with the only person in the world she could trust, her child. She was no longer a victim. She was a survivor. In the end, the courtroom didn't just reveal a truth. It exposed a web of lies so dark and twisted, it destroyed the people who wove it. Elena Rivers, the woman who collapsed on the floor, walked out with her child, her home, and her dignity intact. Mark Rivers lost his wife, his company, and his self-respect, a victim of his own ego and the manipulations of a master con artist. And Chloe Bennet, the woman who smiled at another's pain? Her smile faded forever in the back of a police car. She learned that day that when you try to build your empire on the ruins of someone else's life, the foundation is always sand. And when the truth comes, the tide is brutal. Justice, this time, was served. 99.99999% guaranteed. What do you think? Was Mark a victim, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. These real-life stories are more shocking than fiction. If you were moved by this story, please hit that like button Share this video with someone who loves a story of justice. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible, true-life drama every week.